The Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper. And now, Coach Bill Clark.
Welcome in. It's the maiden voyage of the Coach Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper. With Coach Bill Clark, I'm Pat Smith, along with Landrum Roberts from Three Man Front. We are so happy, Coach. This inaugural show, this is going to be a lot of fun this football season.
Yeah, I'm excited. Obviously, these are things kind of we've talked about, along the way. Things maybe behind the scenes from a head coach or a coach's perspective that maybe we can give some insight to.
Since walking away from your retirement, being out of the game for a couple of years, are you antsy, you chomping at the bit to kind of interact? Not that you haven't been interacting and talking college football. I know you do a lot of speaking, but this is your chance to kind of do what a lot of other people have done over the course of your career.
Yeah, I think, one, I am not in traction. I'm okay. I get that question a lot, which I appreciate.
Amen.
So back is good, feel good, and really the juices are flowing. And I've consulted with some teams, I've spoken a lot, but to get to really talk about maybe behind the scenes and just go through this whole college season. Now, obviously, we got some time on the front end right now where we're getting ready like everybody else and trying to pick out what it looks like going in. But soon we're going to have real games to talk about.
All right, so we hear this all the time about players like getting tired of hitting each other. They want to hit somebody new. Mm-hmm. From a coach's perspective, like, what are you feeling right now as you're about a week away from kickoff?
Yeah, so I said that about my juices. The first show for us is kind of like this is our first game, so I kind of feel that way. Some butterflies, which I always said was a good thing. Yeah, it's that time, and we've got some people playing this week, which we'll discuss. We've got some other people that are a little bit more than a week out. Then you've got the Saturday games, so we got Thursday games, Saturday games. All those things are going to be great to talk about.
In season, when you were the coach, I know that your schedule was absolutely brutal. It was crazy in running a program.
Yeah,
but how often did you watch podcasts of this sort on this kind of platform?
Not a lot. Now, I will say this. I did have some time. I would walk. I tried to walk every day, even with my back. And, that would be either I'm returning a call, maybe I hear something, but I did so many interviews, and I'm always wanting to hear. But, and I did a lot, especially on Thursdays, national shows, you guys' shows. So I did listen to those some. Because you kind of want to know what's out there, and you catch a lot of things just in these interviews.
All right, so we got a lot of great people affiliated with this show. Let's start with Dr. Pepper and Buffalo Rock, because they stepped up. They have been a great proponent of not only college football in the great state of Alabama, but, of course, very good friends with you.
Yeah, first I'm going to talk about Buffalo Rock and Jimmy Lee, the owner of Buffalo Rock. He's kind of maybe stepped down a little bit. I'd say he really has never stepping down. But, those guys, Matthew Dent and all those guys over at Buffalo Rock, have supported UAB football and programs across the state. I know they sponsor Alabama. They're at Auburn as well. I know they've got boxes at both, so sponsored both of those programs. They sponsored my program. Just great friends, which led to the Dr. Pepper relationship. When we were talking about, is this something we can do, we want to do? Immediately they stepped up with Dr. Pepper, who we know, my gosh, how involved are they in college football today, and what a great job they're doing promoting college football.
Absolutely. So we look forward to that partnership all season long. All right, so let's get started. The Smart Bank season preview. Smart Bank coming on board, and each week we're going to take a look at previews at things. And, Coach, let's start with the main programs in the state of Alabama, the SEC's Alabama and Auburn, top three. In your regard, what is the most important facets for those teams?
Yeah, I think Alabama, and these are not things that people are not going to know. I mean, you guys have probably discussed it. I know just on and on. I heard you today talk about recruiting. The things for me that I think are important, maybe people feel the same way or not. Obviously, we know we got Alabama returning quarterback. As we know, I don't think you can overstate having a returning quarterback with this, with Milroe's talent. So we won't say that's as much a key, even though I think the key keeping him healthy. Because then we always go to what's number two. What's the second guy behind that starter when you've got this guy that is the franchise and he's a guy that runs? So there's always that worry. So we know they're set there. Questions I have is, and I think we've seen this wide receiver core they've had that has been so strong, so amazing, which makes the quarterback look great. We've lost a transfer, maybe more than one transfer at that spot. That's always a big deal. I think we've got returners all across the board on offense. I think offensive line, I think we're maybe looking for a right tackle. That's a question. Now I go to the defensive side. We've got Kane Womack, You've got a new system. You had all the multiplicity that Nick Saban was known for. And you hear talk about 4-2-5. What does that mean? I know Kane. I know what a good job he is. I know what kind of coach he is. Where are they with that system? And then I'll kind of speak with that into the secondary. We've lost another big transfer in the secondary. They've got a lot of depth, I think, up front. Secondary is a question. And then my third question is replacing this kicker. And when it comes down to these tight games when they play Georgia and you're replacing your specialist, and I'm hearing great things about their punter, who's the kicker?
So kickers do matter.
Kickers do matter. So that's a quick overview of 3 different phases, which I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. But, that's just some initial thoughts.
When we think about the quarterback situation, obviously, and we'll talk about Auburn in just a moment, but you mentioned what Alabama has had at their disposal at the wide receiver position, and you think about the first-round talent, and maybe talent consecutively we have not seen with any other college football program, maybe ever, to where they were the last couple of years. There was that drop-off. It wasn't a sharp drop-off, but based on what you see personnel-wise right now with what Jalen Milroe is going to have on the outside, would you say improvement from what you saw last year, or would you say right on par with what we saw?
Well, going in, that's the question. So I'm really asking the same questions everybody else is. There's talent, as there always is. If you'll go back, and we go back just from a coaching speak or an X and O standpoint, as they started to morph into this RPO team and taking, getting the ball out quick and on the edges, what happened, their recruiting was so good, and they started saying, man, we've got these great receivers across the board. From a defensive standpoint, the thing I always look for, could I tilt the coverage to Julio? Could I tilt the coverage to this one guy? And when that starts happening, things change. The better they are at number one on both sides. At number two, how good's the tight end? That's when you start, how can I cover this field horizontally, vertically? Oh, and they've got 12 guys because they got a quarterback that runs like a running back.
All right, in regards to Kane Womack, we heard some comments from him after the scrimmage saying that this probably was the most physical scrimmage that he has ever been a part of. And it's interesting, Coach, because we talked to you on the radio show a couple of weeks ago about, what do you do during these scrimmages? You don't want to wrap them in bubble wrap. You don't want to just do thud because you got to practice tackling. Right. You got to work on the physicality. But, man, Kane Womack, they were laying lumber this weekend. And as a coach, have you ever been a part of that, of a head coach of a team that you ran in regards to being that physical in preseason camp?
Well, and I'm not saying that this was my philosophy. Sure. We were very physical, and I've had guys go, man, well, that's how we practiced in the 80s and 90s. I always said, I thought that's the way we were, very physical but safe. We were very physical but staying up. The ones that always worried me is when we tackled to the ground. It just seemed like when guys would end up on the ground, that's where all the injuries would occur. So the scrimmages were always a worry. The question I always have when I go and I watch these guys practice, how physical are you at the point of attack? How physical are you where you lock somebody up or thud them up, but you don't go to the ground? And I think that's the question, because my worry is always when we say an offensive coach, does he let his defense be physical in practice? Right. Now, everybody wants to be great on Saturday. Everybody wants to be the best defense in the country on Saturday, but do you allow yourself to practice that way? If your defensive coordinator is talking about how physical they are, that tells you, and it's pretty obvious that the head coach gets it because how much he's won.
And how much of a roll of the dice is it, especially with the transfer portal now and some of the lack of the depth that you have at every position? But how much are you rolling the dice now? I know it's necessary to be physical, but going at it, because we're seeing guys drop left and right around the country.
It is the true catch-22. How can I be physical without getting hurt? How do I get these people ready without being physical? I don't know these guys. I won't say the program, but, we picked a 6'7" guy and a 6'8" guy because they match the numbers and they won't practice hard. I had a coach tell me that, and I'm like, well, once again, that's some things I go back to my high school days when I said, are we signing this guy because how tall he is, or are we signing because what you see on tape?
Right.
Because I think there are people that are guilty of that, especially in this day and age of what we're seeing right now. And there's going to be mistakes that are made, which means you've got to practice that way. You've got to practice to the point where I can see how he goes when the lights are on, so to speak.
All right, so let's continue the Smart Bank season preview. Let's talk about the Auburn Tigers, because a lot of optimism. They did really well in recruiting. A lot of young guys are going to get an opportunity to play this year. Year 2 for Hugh Freeze.
Yeah, and we talked about some of these things in the Monday show, with you guys on 3-man front. I think obviously everybody that's, an Auburn fan or in the SEC is questioning the quarterback. has he made the improvements? Has Peyton Thorne made the improvements that you would expect to see? Now, what I hear is that that he's had a great offseason, that all that experience has made him better, and he's really had a good camp. I've also heard good things about the number 2 quarterback going in. Once again, you hear me talk. I'm going to talk a lot about the number 2 guy from a guy who's played with a number 3 and won a game with a number 3. Thank God. It's what do we do if it gets to 2? And I've been there. If we get to 2, we got a problem. So that's the world we're in. It's a marathon, not a sprint. But I'm hearing good things about him. So I think that's number 1. Same topic, receiver play. That is the world we're in now when we're talking about RPOs, and we're talking about if you're going to go put 3 and 4 receivers out there, they got to be able to catch the ball. They've got to be able to separate. What are they doing? The guys all over them. Once again, it's like I always said, it's not 7-on-7. What do you do when there's physicality? Can you get open? I think we've got a quarterback that can stay alive. It sounds like everything I'm hearing that Hugh's getting a lot more involved in the offense. What does that mean? Obviously I know he's a good play caller, so I don't think he'll just be the guy doing that, but I think he's more involved. So just talking about quarterback and receiver, sounds like they've come in, especially with those young guys they brought in at receiver. I'm hearing good things. Same question, once again, O-line. I think that was a point of when y'all say that was a question mark from last year.
Yes.
Where are they there? I'm hearing guys that were at the scrimmage that they really struggled against the defense. Now, is that a good mark for the defense? Is the defense improved? I know the defensive coordinator, DJ Durkin, has had some really good defenses. Does that mean the defense is good? Does that mean the O-line is struggling? I heard they had a hard time kind of almost getting back to the line of scrimmage a lot. Now, these are people that were at the scrimmage, so I don't know, because defense is always a question for me, and that doesn't mean you're terrible always. Maybe your defense is playing well. Once again, where are we with the specialty? Where's the specialist? What does that look like for those guys? The 3 phases, and we're going to talk a lot about that.
And so many things that you mentioned right there, and that's going to be the beauty of doing this weekly show with you, is picking your brain, cutting through some of the coach speak that we hear from coaches. And you've admitted you were guilty of the coach speak. You have to be to a certain degree, but kind of getting inside the mind, in the head of a college football coach that's won at a championship level. We're excited to be on board. This is going to be a lot of fun learning.
Well, you guys do a great job. That's what got me interested. I'm being very honest right now. You guys and the jobs you do, how well I know you. And I think we're going to have some fun with this, and hopefully we can talk about some things that are interesting to the viewers and the listeners.
Let's talk about Smart Bank. It's in their name, Smart Bank, and I know they're close friends to yours.
Yeah, so great story. The guy, I was with Compass Bank. No offense to Compass Bank. These guys left and went to Smart Bank. Smart Bank's a new bank. They were in Sevierville. Their first big project was Dollywood. So, obviously that went pretty well.
I would say so.
Yeah,
worked out pretty well.
It worked out well for them, and these guys were Sevierville, right outside of Gatlinburg, Sevier County. That's where their home is. And the story, of course, is a lot of those guys left Compass that I knew and went to Smart Bank. And so I ran into my personal banker on a plane. I said, "Where are you at?" "I'm at Smart Bank." Next thing you know, I'm on the advisory board, and I'm there. My kids are there. So great bank. Check them out.
All right, Coach, let's talk about Webb Concrete's Building Blocks to Victory. And we got a big one overseas, Dublin, Ireland, ACC battle between Georgia Tech and Florida State.
Yeah, so I think the first thing we got to talk about is travel. How do you handle the travel? And we're going to get into this later in the show. What do you do really 2 days before the game, 3 days? Now, when do you get there for this game? Obviously, we know what Florida State did last year. I think there's a ton of questions out there. We got a new transfer quarterback in. Sounds like Coach Norvell's built this program on transfers. I'm hearing they've got a lot more good ones. So there's plenty there. Georgia Tech, there's a lot of talk out there that they're going to be much improved. I think there's a chance they could get to a bowl game, but this is a tough start with a really good Florida State team, we think. Let me tell you a little bit about Webb Concrete and Building Supplies. Phil Webb, truly one of the great people out there, loves college football, was a big supporter of ours at Jacksonville State. I know he's a friend to a lot of programs around the state. This was a family-owned business in Heflin, Alabama that used to be just concrete. Now they do building supplies. If you're anywhere on the road, you're probably seeing a concrete truck with Webb. I know I've had houses built with those guys. Huge sponsor, and Phil is very philanthropic with a lot of charities around the area. Just great people. We'll talk more about them later on, as we go down throughout the year.
All right, with the season opener for both of these teams, Florida State is the favorite heading into this game. We know how they finished last season. Brent Key, you're hearing good things about the Yellow Jackets, but you're replacing a lot for Florida State. Meanwhile, for Georgia Tech, you're bringing back a 1,000-yard rusher. You've got your top 2 wide receivers back and your quarterback in Haynes King. To me, this sets up badly for Florida State, not only having to play a tough opponent to start the season, but all of those question marks that you have, the travel, and then playing at a neutral site and all the distractions that come with playing in Dublin.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a quick answer on Florida State and Georgia Tech, obviously. But, the question for me is, what was the hangovers from that loss? And a lot of times it could go badly, but it could be, that just kind of kicked them in the butt and said, man, we don't want to deal with that again. They had so many guys out in that game. So, it's just going to be I think it's going to be a great test, both teams.
All right, so Alabama Power each and every week on this program. It's the Alabama Power 5 of the week. And what we do, it's the Power 5. It's Bill Clark's Power 5. And I know you might go a little bit deeper than that for this week, but give us right now the preseason Power 5 in your opinion.
Well, first let me say, and everybody that watches football can do this. So this is not I don't know that we have any magic formula. We're going to kind of use a lot of the things that other people use to start with. I was not a lover of preseason polls because so much of it goes into what last year. We do have those people, the Phil Stills of the world, that do such a great job of giving us behind the scenes in the preseason. That's what you guys do.
We love it.
Yeah, I know you do, and that's great. Hey, we need something to do. So this is Alabama Power top 5 plus. I'll say top 5 plus. Georgia. Obviously know Coach Smart, know that staff, what a great job they do. I think they're reloading. We watched them at the end of the year with a lot of their young guys coming in, just putting it on Florida State then. So we're going with them 1. We know what's going on at Ohio State. They went out and got Chip Kelly, who I know, great offensive coordinator. And we know the transfers they've got in, Ole Miss, Judkins, so on and so forth. Oregon, 3, with all the money. And I would just say this, when the head coach is told, hey, money's not an object, what does that tell you? And that's what he's been told. So go get them. Texas right now 4. I think we've all got questions about the running back situation, but we're going to have to see them. But I think right now I would say 4. I'm going with Alabama 5 based on just what they've done in the past. I think they've got that chance. I'm going to give you some other names. I think these are all names we know. We talked about Notre Dame, Penn State, Missouri, FSU, Clemson, and Utah. That's kind of as we think about the 12-team playoff. That's what we're going to throw out. We're also I'm going to give a little tease. I think we need to – I've been in discussions with some guys about doing a non-Power 5 top 10.
I like that.
Where we get some of the AAC guys and those guys. Now, is that derogatory to those guys? Does that take them out of the big time? I don't think so.
When you were at Jacksonville State, did that bother you that you were in a completely different ranking system than what an Alabama and Auburn was?
I don't think so, especially if we just sit here, we could have a whole show on what those guys have and what these guys have. It's just different.
I think it gives you a better chance to just spotlight and recognize more programs.
That's what I think. So I think it's good. I've talked to these guys, whether we're talking about Rich Rodriguez and some of those guys that have got good programs, and they're going to go try and beat those guys. But I think to be able to recognize, and of course we know that team's probably going to go undefeated, a la Liberty. Who's that team that got a chance to get in based on the way they're doing the format now?
So Alabama Power is going to bring that to us each and every week here on this program. And Alabama Power, needless to say, one of the great corporate entities here in the great state of Alabama.
Well, here's what I would say about Alabama Power. And I think, anytime we're talking about bills we all have to pay, here's what I would say from what I've seen from them, how involved they are. Whenever I talked about, my good friend Nick Sellers with the World Games and how involved they were, all these different philanthropic pieces they are, and just being part of the community, which is I think we can all say that about Alabama Power. They're always part of the community, helping out where they're needed.
Each and every week on this program, Donahue Chevrolet is going to bring us the Drive for Success coach. And I just want to ask you, from a coach's mindset, as you get ready for a very long season, tell us where you are right now mindset-wise.
Yeah, so you've come out of the last scrimmage. You're really trying to get that depth chart ready because, and I'll use a Thursday game next week. That was what I was very familiar with, but it could be a Saturday game. You're really getting in game mode. What does that look like? You've got school started. You've got less time with these guys. So you're back in the office. They're back in class. And I say office. You're not in camp mode. So It's getting ready. Remember what I said? First game, I said this on 3-man front. First game or second game, is this a really tough opponent, or like a lot of the SEC teams, they're playing that game, that bye game. Maybe they've got a big game week 2. Maybe it's 2 games like that, and then big game week 3. They're all important, but you're trying to get that schedule just right.
As far as when you go through, and I know that you'll go through operationally with your staff, with your team, just to see what it's like for those who haven't experienced it, working out any kinks you might have communication-wise. When do you start transitioning to that at this stage if you have a game, say, coming up next Saturday?
Yeah, so you have a set schedule that you're going to follow throughout the year that doesn't change a lot. You may go a little less physicality as the year goes along. Maybe you got a few guys, but you've got this planned out. And I would just say this for a guy that coached almost 35 years, what you learn is these things that lost a game for you, whether it becomes an obsession with ball security, whether it's a Hail Mary play that you got beat on. I can go through the list over and over. I started adding those things earlier and earlier in camp. 30 seconds left. We're down by 3. What do we do where we don't try? And we could talk a whole show about that, but you're trying to get all those scenarios in. Another thing I want to talk about is what time is your game? And we'll talk more about this, but what time is that game? You're trying to do scrimmages that fit around that game. The meal, when did you eat that meal? 3 hours before? What did that look like? How did they act going in? And taking it through all those processes to make the game as normal as possible. Because what have you got? You got family coming in. You got band. You got TV. You got lights, camera action. And in football, unlike other sports, it's not, hey, we're going to play you home and home, and then I'll see you in the tournament. It's one time, and they keep up with it forever.
Were you superstitious as a coach?
I would say I was superstitious about all my different scenarios and getting them worked out. I called it play the game. We did it every week, and I'll just real quickly talk about it. I still remember 4th and 8. I talked about it 1,000 times with Bryant Vincent, who's head coach at Monroe, and we'd done 4th and 8, one play left to win the game. I don't know if we'd ever got it. I said, BYU is 4th and 8. I said, we got one play. You know what it is. Go. He called it. We'd worked it 1,000 times, touchdown.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like, So let's talk about Donahue right quick. Chris Donahue, the owner of Donahue Chevrolet. I mean, truly a friend of mine, a friend of our program at UAB. Those guys provided cars for us at UAB and always did such a great job. They did such a great job, I ended up buying 2 cars. I bought a car for my son, Jacob, and then I just bought a car for myself and my wife in the summer. So they do a great job. They're great people and really give great customer care.
Dr. Pepper and Buffalo Rock, they bring this program each and every week, Coach. And once again, Jimmy Lee and those fine folks over there, they do a tremendous job.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this allowed us to have this program, and I think it's going to be fun. And thank you to those guys. Thank you for supporting, like I said, not only my program, but other programs in the state. And obviously what Dr. Pepper's doing with college football is just, it's a big deal, promoting our sport.
I want to kind of get back to the foundation because you've coached at every single level. You're the son of a guy that your dad coached a long time here in the state of Alabama and the passion for it. You didn't get into it. I think, I'm not going to speak for you, but ultimately, was it an aspiration to coach at the college level, or was it to be successful, which you were, in winning championships at the high school level?
Yeah, I don't think it was just to get into college. I think it was about the relationships. I know it sounds corny, but that's what I loved. I loved seeing him with players. I loved seeing the motivation. And there was all those facets. I love sitting in that back room with him, as I always tell the story. And that the one place in the house had the air conditioning unit was where he watched film. So I kind of migrated to that. But the X and O's, the dealing with the coaches, the players, the making them do things they didn't know they could do, that's what got me into it. And I think every step of the way, that's what I wanted to keep. That's what we can't get lost in this NIL and big business of college football, that these are still young men. And what it does for communities, what it does for schools, high schools included, which I love. Guys know that. I love the relationship between the coach and player. We're going to talk a lot about that. I love coaches and players and what it does for them to hopefully make them better, productive citizens.
I talked to a coach that won a championship at the high school level. He ultimately coached at the college level as well. What he told me was, I said, why did you get into it? Why do you do it? And he said, it's almost that high. It's that feeling. Yeah. And he said, it's hard to describe, but when you know that the light bulb has come on inside of that young man that you're coaching and you've impacted that young man, that player, He said, I know for me and for 95% of the other coaches that I know in this profession, that's why you do it.
Yeah, I used to sit there at the end of the table. I'd try and do it every day, as we went around and said, hey, I want to hear about these guys. What's going on? We're going to say a prayer for these guys. Now, you can sit over in the corner and meditate, but we're going to say a prayer for these guys. And we would text them, and that meant so much to them that it was more than just a game, that we truly cared about them. But those were the things that not just an individual, but when you could bring a team together. That's, there's a lot of great individual sports, but bringing a team, and that's what football is. It's an army. Pulling those guys together and the trainers and the strength staff and all those guys have got to be on the same page. That's what makes football so great. It's all those things going together.
Well, I want to ask you, Coach, because there's two facets of what you've been doing. One, you've been doing for a long time with Children's Harbor, but also what you've been doing with Coach Jack Crow and Coach Safely.
Yeah, so Children's Harbor, in fact, Leanne Crow is very involved with Children's Harbor and fundraising for that group. We came up with this thought. We're going to talk more about it later, but how do we honor Children's Harbor? Children's Harbor was created out at Lake Martin, Russell Family, a harbor for families and children who have childhood diseases. I mean, if you think of something with a child, it just breaks your heart. And they created a safe harbor for these families. They're here at the Children's Hospital. We got involved with those. They were right there by us at UAB. So that's a great charity to be part of. And we're going to talk about that when the UAB game comes later. The Children's Harbor game comes on. We'll have Coach Dilfer talk about that.
That should be a lot of fun. I want to remind everybody all the places that they can watch, they can consume this product that we do each and every week. First off, got to give a plug because Coach Bill Clark will join us, Landrum, every Monday at 1 o'clock as we will kind of recap what took place over a very busy weekend in college football and kind of look ahead. And then this program, you'll be able to consume the video portion of this podcast on all the social media channels of both JOX 94.5 and Coach Bill Clark. And then on top of that, on Thursday nights at 6 o'clock, prior to the NFL kickoff, and there might be a variation throughout the season depending on certain schedules with our college partners, but you will be able to hear this program on JOX 94.5. So a wonderful opportunity for not only to be able to talk about Children's Harbor, but also Coach Safely.
Yeah, so Coach Safely, Coach Jack Crow started Coach Safely, and you've probably seen the commercials from
Absolutely.
me and Coach Saban, Coach Pearl. What happened? We created Coach Safely, and this was Jack's idea, and he's brought it to fruition. We created a law in the state of Alabama which does just what we want, which is to help, and these are grades 8 and down. We're talking about our young kids, to create a platform for coaches to learn how to coach safely, which means access to trainers, heat illness, smart coaching, the best coaching practices, all these things. We created a law, and we're trying to get every coach in the state to be registered. That our state pay for that. So you hear about Alabama? We were number one right here first. Arkansas has adopted this law. There's going to be other states to adopt this law. And as we use these public properties and public lands, we want to look out there and know our coaches have that Coach Safely tag on them, that lanyard that says, hey, I've been trained the right way.
Yeah, and it all comes back to the kids, but it also comes back to being responsible and keeping the sport, whatever sport it is.
That's correct, all sports.
Keeping it healthy, keeping it alive, and everybody continuing to enjoy the things that we're so passionate about.
Yeah, so they will play, and that's what we want. So kids will play sports safely, so they will play safely.
And in regards to the coaching, I know when I was coaching youth ball, with Alabama being one of the first states, I had to take certain tests, certain health tests to make sure that I knew in case of an emergency how to take care of those kids because of Coach Safely.
And we're not saying that people weren't doing great things. I mean,
Absolutely.
we were all coached in youth sports and great coaches. And almost every parent that has children, as we all have been involved.
Yes.
They've been involved with that. This is kind of that next step.
Well, listen, it's been a great, quick first show of the Coach Bill Clark Show presented by Dr. Pepper. Coach Bill Clark, Landrum Roberts, myself, Pat Smith, will be with you each and every week as we will dive into further discussion of college football, even some high school football as well. Coach, I hope it was good for you, your first time out.
I enjoyed it.
A lot of fun. For
it.
all of us here at JOX 94.5 and the Coach Bill Clark Show, we want to thank Dr. Pepper, Webb Concrete, Smart Bank, Alabama Power, Donahue Chevrolet, all these great sponsors that's going to be with us, Landrum, for the rest of the way throughout this football season.
And Coach Clark has learned we're coachable.
We are very coachable.
Yes, be coachable.
By the way, we have to be.
We're working on that.
We'll be 5 stars by the end of the season.
Really work with him.
Yes.
No, this one.
No, 4 hours every day. You need to work.
Don't trust him.
I don't know about that. For all of us at the Bill Clark Show, we'll see you next week on the Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper.
This has been the Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper.